Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Green Witch Homestead. So we have officially passed our first frost date here in central Missouri. However, true to form, it's 65 degrees, we haven't seen a lick of frost, and everything is still beautiful and green in my garden. I think they're going to reevaluate the first frost date here in our area, but they may not, because there is still a chance that it can happen by, I believe it's October 21st. A couple nights where it got really cold, but there was no frost. And like I said, it's beautiful, it's green, my tomatoes are still growing, all of my plants are still growing. However, it is that time where we need to start thinking about pulling things out before the frost can kill them. So we're going to continue on with our garden winterization. Last weekend I built the high tunnel. I'm going to show you the finished product of what that looks like and what I've done to the beds inside of it to get ready for planting throughout the winter. I'm also using this time to harvest all of my herbs. I pull them all out by the roots. Any that aren't going to survive the winter, trim them off a bit, clean them up just a smidge, and then they all get bundled and brought inside to hang dry. This is basil. It smells good. It smells so good. I do prefer my herbs fresh, however, not all of them can grow throughout the winter. Let's take a quick walk through the garden and show you what's still growing, what the garden looks like this time of year for us. I'll show you some of the things that I'm going to do to winterize my garden and to keep some of the plants that'll overwinter happy and healthy throughout the cold season. So the little flower patch herbal garden right here, I've still got some zinnias growing right there. And it's pretty much bedded down. The raspberries are done for the season. I got to trim those back. The irises are going to have to be mulched. And the herb garden over here is getting a little more sparse because I've been picking through it. I've got to cut my motherwort bushes down. There's lavender back there. The sage has got to come out. For the sage and the oregano and the lemon balm, I don't pull it out. Same thing with the rosemary. I just trim it back and take the branches that are fresh and green to bring inside to dry for my use. And then I'll put a nice heavy layer of mulch down, and they will overwinter and they'll come back next year. Things like basil, they're not going to overwinter. The lavender, it's iffy. I try every year. So far, my winters have gotten too cold for it to come back. But I keep trying different varieties every year, and eventually I'll find one that'll survive our winter. I mean, it's looking a little sparse, but the zinnia pool is holding up, and it's still attracting butterflies. And our tomatoes, so they are a hot mess, and they are pretty much done. So as I mentioned in last week's video, tomato season has passed. It's one of those things that's a little tricky, especially for new gardeners. You have to really look at the plants and look at how they grow throughout the summer. The plants still are growing, they're still putting flowers off, and they're still producing fruit. However, I know that the days here are not long enough and not warm enough for those fruit to come to fruition. So, in truth, it's time for the tomatoes to come out. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull most of these plants out, pick any of the fruit that's on them off. The bigger fruits I'm going to set onto some cardboard and let them ripen. The rest of them I'm going to chop them up and put them in the freezer as green tomatoes and use for a bunch of different things. Our habanada peppers, and they are still loaded. They're not ripening as fast as they could because it's this time of year is just not enough light. And then our hot peppers over here as well. These guys I'm going to be digging the plants up and bringing them inside to overwinter them in pots under the grow lights. The carrot bed, it's been picked through for most of the season, and it's a little sparse now, but whatever's left in here is all going to get dug out and come inside and be processed. I've found with growing carrots that I will do one full bed dedicated to the carrots, and I will put them in early spring, and I will harvest off of them throughout the summer, and then come the end of the season when they start to flower, I've had one or two that have started to go to flower, I will pull everything out and bring it inside, and then we will chop them up, put some in the freezer, can some. It means that I don't have a huge harvest to put away, but it does, you know, it lets me have fresh carrots all summer long. So until I get a bit bigger space broken down enough in the big fields for carrots to grow, I'm just going to have a small amount of carrots. We are getting there. I think next year our field space will actually be broken down and worked enough that I can grow root vegetables in it better. So stay tuned next season and hopefully we'll be planting carrots in the market garden. This is the garlic bed, and as you can see, she's all ready for her garlic to go in. There's a few right here that I missed the bulbs, so they've started to grow on their own. So I've just kind of organized them and left them over here, and I will plant everybody else in here next week, actually. My comfrey right here, it's time for its last trim of the season. And then as you can see, the high tunnel, we've got it closed off. It's by no means a professional job. Like I said, I don't have the framework for a proper door, and I didn't want one because this is not a permanent structure. It's going to come down in the spring when it warms up enough to grow in the open air. But you can kind of see what I was talking about, having the two panels crisscross that I can open up and walk through. I'm going to go ahead and open the greenhouse up for the day. As you can see, my zucchini flowers are begging for some pollinators. All right, so welcome to the high tunnel. I've got a couple of my ladies in here that are being bug patrol and getting the last of the insects out before we close her up for the winter. It's as simple as that. It's not the most convenient. You do have to duck to get under it, but it works, and it's what I had on hand. And as you can tell, my zucchini are growing fantastically. I've been pulling probably 3 or 4 zucchinis off of these plants every day, and they're still producing. I have found that I have to come out early morning and hand pollinate, which is fine. I knew that was going to be the case. It's not that big of a problem. They won't be producing for much longer. Unfortunately, will not survive the coldness of winter, so they will be pulled out eventually, and I'm going to have cabbages come in here on this side. This bed over here has been amended, as you can tell. So I've pulled all of the weeds out. I brought in a couple bucket loads of my rabbit manure and a couple bucket loads of the litter mulch from underneath my chicken coop. And then I've spread it evenly out over this bed, watered it in, and I'm going to let it sit for about a week and soak all those good nutrients down into the soil before I plant in it for the winter. And that should give a nice boost for my plants throughout the winter. I will do it again in the spring. Usually I only do it this time of year and let it sit all winter long. But because I am going to be planting in it, those plants are going to use up the nutrients, and then if I plant again in the summer without amending it, I'm going to be stunting my growth. If you've never hand pollinated zucchini before, this is the basics on how you do it. You've got these flowers here, which have that really long stem, and then you have this flower down here, which is attached, I don't know if you can see it, to a little zucchini. See that? Now this is a female flower, and this is a male flower. The inside of the male flowers have a single stamen, where the inside of the female flowers have multiple. So all that you do to hand pollinate is you pick a male flower that's already opening and you peel all the petals off, so that it looks like this. The reason that you want to pick a flower that the petals are already opening is it tells you it's ready to pollinate. And then you just take this, just rub it all over the female flower. Some of the other things that I do in my garden this time of year is I start picking which things I'm going to save seed from. So some of the zinnias, for example, all of my motherwort. A lot of the plants will reseed themselves and come back next year from their rootstock, but I do like to save seeds just in case. So this is the time of year that I go through and I assess everything and I pick which ones I'm going to save seeds from. The only thing that I've already saved seeds from is tomatoes. And the reason that I do that early is because, like I've said before, for better germination rate, you want the fruit that you're saving seed from to come to full fruition. That way you can guarantee that most of those seeds are ready to grow a new plant. So I picked my tomato earlier in the year and I let it ripen on the vine. I protected it and I waited until it was almost rotten before I pulled it off and harvested the seeds from it. The peppers are still ripening, so I will wait and harvest one from them that I like. But again, with the peppers, you can overwinter them. So I kind of do two things. I take cuttings and I take some seeds from the plant. This here, I haven't talked much about it. This is roselle. It's got these beautiful seed pods on them, and this is what you want. It's the second time I've grown this plant. This one is a little spindly and sparse compared to how they normally are. Those flower pods are used in a traditional Jamaican drink, which you can do as an iced summertime drink, or you can do it alcoholic, which is always kind of fun. It has a kind of cranberry citrusy taste to it. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to kind of make a jelly or a jam with it and use it as a cranberry substitute for Thanksgiving. It's really, really high in vitamin C, and it's really good for you. It's not the easiest plant in the world to grow because it is technically a tropical and takes a long, long time to come to fruition. When I start seeds from this plant, I do them indoors in around the end of January, and then I'm going to pot them up several times before they can come outside. And so they're fairly well-established plants before they come out into my garden. That's the only way that I've found so far to get them to where they can have the flower pods on them for harvest. That's pretty much it for this time of year. As you can see, the garden still looks like it's producing a lot despite the temperature drops at night. With the temperatures this low, it takes too long for the fruits to come to fruition, so it is time to pull the garden out. Basically, we're just going to come through and everything's going to get a nice layer of sawdust and mulch on top of it to sit down and sleep throughout the winter and get ready for us to plant in the spring. One of the other things that we've been doing this time of year is cleaning out the larder. Basically getting all of the freezer's space ready for this year's hunt and harvest. Basically we'll butcher and we'll eat fresh throughout the winter and the summer, and then come fall we take anything extra out and we chop it up, process it, turn it into stock or broth, soup. Sometimes we'll just can the meat straight, stuff like that, and get them into jars in the cupboards for easy use, and open up the freezer space for all of our fresh stuff that's going to be coming in the next couple weeks. Well, that's pretty much all there is to winter gardening, guys. It's sad that it's not a big, abundant season like it is in the summertime, but with a little bit of tweaking here and there, you can still produce food in your garden throughout the winter months. Our winters here are not super long, but we do occasionally drop down into the negatives. So we'll see if this is going to be beneficial and if it's going to actually last throughout the winter. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you can follow along on the high tunnel adventures with us and not miss any of the updates. My fingers are crossed that it's a success and not a failure, but only time can tell. Anyway, I'm going to finish my morning coffee and enjoy a little bit of a break before I get into the full swing of bedding my garden down for the winter. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you learned something, and I hope you come back next week. And remember, get your hands dirty.